So I'm filming this hoping that we're not all over Superman by the time I post it. Timing is everything in this YouTube world, and I seem to not have it, so good luck to me. Anyway, neither here nor there. Superman came out, and it brought to the forefront the broader conversation of how to do Superman well, if it's even possible. And it's an interesting debate, and one that Literature Devil did way better than I could ever hope to, but I'm going to try to give you a shorter answer than he gave. I am going to link to his video, though, because it's one of the better character video essays I've ever seen. Now, Superman does have some crazy diehard fans who just don't care about Supes being relatable or realistic. They just like to see Superman be Superman, so they're fine as long as the character isn't ruined and the flight looks good. I am not in this camp. I wasn't a comic book reader as a kid, so my early Superman exposure came from three sources. Richard Donner's Superman, and you know how I feel about Richard Donner. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, which I feel like we're all kind of sleeping on. And Superman the Animated Series. It was fine. Justice League was better. I guess you could say Justice League 2, but that's like an extension of Superman the Animated Series. I did really like Superman as a kid before Batman the Animated Series came out, and then I was just all about Batman and left Superman way behind in my imagination. This is partially because even at a young age, I and even my younger siblings had similar complaints about Superman that it seems like the world at large does now. I mean, he's too powerful. How do you make his stories interesting? Well, for those things, the answer was usually do something like take his powers via kryptonite, or someone like Parasite, have someone invent some new weapon, or just have an alien or robot who's strong enough to fight him. And then it basically just became a Marshall test, sometimes with some detective work to figure out what the villain is up to, or his weakness and how to stop him, that kind of thing. And it got repetitive and a little dull after not too long. That's the powers issue, and Superman also has a character issue, because Superman is a paragon of virtue. He always does the right thing no matter what, and that is a boring character. Right? Only sometimes. You see, the problem is that we think of him as a superhero, and superheroes fight supervillains, and when you limit your thinking to just that makes Superman boring. The stories that you need to be telling with Superman are these. Superman is a person who was born with the One Ring. He has absolute power, and that is a very heavy temptation. We treat Superman like he's a moral paragon because he's a moral paragon, when the approach should be he's a man who chooses to be a moral paragon, despite what he's capable of. Really, all of Bruce and Lex's fears about Superman are justified. If he used his power for evil, what could anyone do to stop him? A lot of times in these movies and series, it's hard to take those fears seriously, but that is how you make an interesting Superman movie. Get us to feel the same fear. A lot of people have been laying the blame on Zack Snyder recently, but Superman has been full of Christ imagery for decades. And I want to explore that. To me, for most of my life, the two most engaging stories in the Gospels as stories are Jesus' temptation in the desert and the Garden of Gethsemane, because those are intense moments of drama. Now, whether or not you believe it, here's the setting if viewed strictly as a story. Jesus is God incarnate, come down to earth to sacrifice himself for the payment of our sins. But there are catches to that setup. One, in order to be that sacrifice, he must be mortal.
And all that implies.
He has to get hungry. He has to get tired. He has to get angry, sad, depressed, lonely, scared, and annoyed. And this might be something that we don't want to think about, but Jesus got horny sometimes. He experienced all of the physical and emotional situations we find ourselves in that tempt us to sin. And number two, the sacrifice only works if he is completely sinless. If he were to ever sin, even once, his body and his soul would be corrupted, and then his death would be a punishment for his own sin, not ours. So with that as the setup, Jesus went into the desert to fast and pray for 40 days. Then Satan, the devil himself, came to tempt him. And another, building up on the story tension here, Mark Driscoll said years ago that we need to stop giving the devil so much credit. He is a finite being that is limited by space and time. So stop saying that the devil is tempting you. He probably doesn't even know your name. He's much busier with much bigger things than whether or not Joe Schmo yells at his sister. You are probably not being tempted by the devil. Most of us probably only warrant like an intern demon. And with that being said, keep in mind that you are probably getting tempted by a teeny little demon. So think about the most you have ever been tempted to do anything, the most you have ever wanted to do something that you knew was wrong, and realize that that was probably just a level 1 demon, if not just your own sin nature sabotaging you without any outside help whatsoever. As bad as that was for you, Jesus is being tempted by the devil himself. It is exponentially worse.
High degree of difficulty.
So Jesus is being tempted in the desert, and he has a human body. He is starving, and Satan offers him a way to eat. He feels human pain, and Satan offers him a way to retake the world without having to suffer and die on the cross. Jesus is a human and would be tempted by these offers, and in the background is the knowledge of how big a deal it would be if he gives in to even one of those temptations. If it happened, the story of salvation is over. Done. God lost. Satan won. And beyond that, if God sinned, I don't know what that would mean to the universe. Heaven had to have been holding their breaths if they breathe. After Jesus faces that final temptation, the Bible says angels ministered to him, which means fed him and strengthened him. And in this scenario, I've always pictured like a crowd of angels looking back and forth between God and heaven, and Jesus being tempted and just begging God to let them help while he's pulling a William Wallace. I don't know, that's just where my brain goes. In the second story, in the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was about to face one of the most painful 16 hours in human history. And he knew that. In this moment, he asked God if there was another way to do what he needed to do, please let that happen. He was terrified. He did not want to do it, but he went through with it because it was the right thing to do. In the midst of that, there is a brief moment that a lot of people forget about. When the guards came to get him, they ask, "Are you Jesus of Nazareth?" And he says, "I am," which is the name God gave himself way back in the book of Exodus. And when he says that, when that voice says that phrase, the guards fall over. Jesus could have escaped at any moment, and he wouldn't have needed effort or violence to do so. But he didn't. He even says that if he asked, God would send 10,000 angels to rescue him, which implies that it wouldn't have even been a sin to not do it, but he did it anyway. Now, I say all that to say that that is the thing that we need to remember about Superman. He has the powers of a god, and the only thing that keeps him from using those powers like Zeus is that he believes it would be wrong. He feels hungry, sleepy, angry, annoyed, sad, lonely, horny, every emotion that might tempt him to give into his desires to use his powers for selfish things. He wants to do everything you and I do, but he doesn't do it. So, what should you do to tell a good Superman story? Tempt him. Tempt him to use his powers for evil. Pull it off so that the audience is actually nervous that he will, and now they're engaged. Don't make it contrived. Make it real. Make it a situation that the audience almost feels like it would be justified. Almost. There's that nagging voice in the back of their head telling them that he shouldn't do it. Or you could do something like bring in Scarecrow, just something to make him afraid and a little jumpy or paranoid or something. Putting Superman in situation after situation where his powers not only don't help him, they actually make the situation worse because of the temptation that comes with them. That is an engaging story. But there is another way to make Superman relatable. We forget that he isn't all powerful. He's invulnerable, he's super strong, he can fly, he has cold breath, x-ray vision, super hearing, laser eyes, zoom vision. We all know the power set. But he does have limitations beyond kryptonite. While he is super fast, he is not omnipresent. He is as beholden to the rules of space and time as anyone else. So that's another way to give him problems. Situations that are outside the realm of possibility, even for him, without just making somebody slightly stronger than he is, like Doomsday or Darkseid or Lobo, etc. It sounds funny, but give him the old 2 people ask me to prom and I don't know what to do, but with death. Richard Donner's Superman really figured that out by having Lex launch 2 nukes. Superman can't deal with both of them at once, so he has to choose which one to deal with first and then hope that he's not too late for the second. Another way that Richard Donner handled Superman really well was having his adoptive dad die of a heart attack. That is not canon. In every other version of Superman before Snyder's, Pa Kent is still alive. But that choice gave us this moment with Clark.
All those things I can do. All those powers. And I couldn't even save him.
If his dad was unconscious on a train track, Superman could save him without breaking a sweat. But a heart attack? There is nothing he can do about that. He's powerless against disease and other maladies. And this means that he suffers loss, and there's nothing he can do about it. And that means that he can fear it just as much as we do, because he has a lot of powers, but he's still a human with human emotions and desires and attachments. And if you have those, you can be tempted to do something wrong because of them. And this is where Donner really succeeded by having him fail to save Lois. That moment is when you remember that Superman went to Juilliard. Y'all know what happens then. Superman travels back in time to save her as Jor-El tells him not to. And I think that is where Superman 2 really screwed up. Were I writing it, I would have treated the time travel as some horrible wrong that only Superman even knows happened. But it causes some sort of fallout, and a good bit of 2 is him having to live with and deal with that fallout. Meanwhile, Zod on the loose, he could consistently be tempted to do it again to get do-overs on situations. Maybe he even would give in over and over, and it starts to have more and more disastrous results. This is just a thought spitballing here. The other thing that you can do to make Superman relevant is that while Superman is a paragon of virtue, that doesn't mean that the right choice is always obvious. You want Superman to be relatable, put him in situations where he has to choose between 2 bad options. Zack Snyder actually kind of understood this. Kind of. He knew that this was a good idea for how to add some drama to the story of Superman. Unfortunately, the choices he made weren't necessarily that difficult. A lot of time was spent on him deciding whether or not to side with the Kryptonians to recreate Krypton. The problem with this dual choice is that doing so coinciding with the eradication of the human race meant we all knew that it was a non-starter for the Man of Steel. But he did have that moment when he has to choose between killing Zod and letting Zod kill a small family. The gravity of the situation was lowered by the sheer volume of people that were probably killed by their previous flight fight, but those are the moments that we should be throwing at Superman. Do you do something terrible or allow something terrible to happen? Again, the sequel really dropped the ball there because it should have spent some time on Superman dealing with that moment. Cavill's performance certainly made it seem like that was incoming. Oh well. All that to say, that is the key to a good Superman story. Temptation. He has powers comparable to a Greek god, but he's still human in all the ways that matter. He is capable of great evil, so put him in situations where that evil is appealing. The catch is he either has to resist or have extreme consequences if he gives in, or sometimes extreme consequences if he doesn't. You'll see me next time if you subscribe. Bye.